Good evening and welcome to this live with myself, Saj Hussain. Just give it a few moments just to make sure all the tech is working. And in fact, if you are watching live, just say hi so I know that you're on and the sound is working okay. Just give me a quick hello. Just make sure this is on. Okay, so this live session I do on a Monday evening at 8:30 p.m. for about half an hour. Really, I'm using my time, skill, and experience to help you get further faster in your property investing journey. I've been investing in property for about 15 years now, and during that time, I've done many different strategies. Some will work better than others. And really, one of the things I've realized is using the right strategy at the right time. So something that worked, for example, 5 years ago may not be the right time now to be using that strategy, or something that we're using right now may not be the right strategy next year or the year after. The only certainty in property and property investing is constant change, that the market is changing all the time. So what we're doing is looking at making sure we've got the right strategy for the right time. So if you've got a question for me, make sure you put it in the comment section on whichever platform you're watching on. So this is live on various different platforms. It's on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter as well. So if you put a comment in the comment section, if you've got a question for me, and what I will do is I'll go through the questions in the order I receive them and answer them for you. So first of all, just say a quick hello if you can see and hear me okay. And then we'll get started in just a moment. So as I said, depending on what platform you're on, just put a question in the comment section, and then we'll answer those in the order that they appear. So I think we've got some from Instagram that were earlier on. Do you have some? Can I have a look at those? What I'll do, I can start with those. Mind my glasses for this bit. So these are questions that came through earlier on from on Instagram. So the name is known as Liban. The question is, if I have a 4-bedroom HMO, do I need a license? If I don't, do I need to follow HMO standards? So great question. So, well, first of all, it depends on the area in terms of where you are, because the local authorities vary from area to area. Because you've not said where it is, I'm just going to make the assumption that you're local to me in Birmingham and what the rules are for Birmingham. So right now in Birmingham, we're in Article 4 area. So if you've got 3 or more people in a shared house, technically it's a HMO, you need planning permission for that, but you don't necessarily need a HMO license, or you don't need a HMO license unless you've got 5 people in the house. Once you've the 5 people in the house, then you need to apply for a HMO license as well. In terms of the standards, if you've only got 4 people in the house, really your objective is to keep the property safe, to keep it safe for those that are living there, to make sure that you've got fire safety measures in place. Just because you haven't applied for a license and you're not having to comply with all those things to be able to get a license, it doesn't mean that you should really ignore the safety measures that you might have in place. So that's what I would say to that. Let me just see if there's a follow-up question. Okay, so different questions. What I'll do is I'll start with some of these questions that have just coming through now. If you've got a question you want me to answer for you this evening, make sure you put it in the comment section on whichever platform that you're watching it on, and we'll try and answer those in the question that they in the order that they appear. So a few people are saying hi. Thank you so much, first of all, for being here. I appreciate you giving up your time to be with me this evening. So we've got a question here on Facebook from Omar Hanid. Hi, Saj, how easy is it to get consent to let approved, and can it be long term? So consent to let is when you've got a property which may be, for example, on a residential mortgage, and what you want to do is effectively turn it into a buy-to-let by letting it out. But your restriction is your mortgage doesn't allow you to do that. Your mortgage may be for residential purposes, or you can live in it as your home, but not necessarily allow you to be able to rent it out for you to move somewhere else. That would be a buy-to-let mortgage. So the way buy-to-lets and residential mortgages work are quite different. Just as a caveat, I'm not a mortgage advisor, so what I'm sharing with you is my knowledge and experience. So it's good to speak to a mortgage advisor about this as well. Now, in my experience, what I've found is that the lenders will vary in terms of their opinion and their responses to this. So some lenders will be more open to it, while others will be dead against it. As I said, the type of mortgages are very different. The criteria they follow in offering you the mortgages are very different, and also depend on how long you've had the mortgage. So, for example, if you took out a mortgage last year, the process you would have gone through and the application may be very different to, say, one you might have taken out, say, 10 years ago at that time. So, depending on the lender, what you'll find is they'll respond differently. But what you need to do is put a good case forward as to why you need to do that. So, for example, you might be relocating somewhere else to for work because right now, you know, the market, everything's changing, and you've got to go where the work is. So you might need to be somewhere else for work. You can't afford to keep the property empty, so you'll request consent to let. And if they are providing you consent, often you'll find they'll provide you for a period of time. So, for example, for 6 months or 12 months, and then they'll review it again, as opposed to it being a permanent change. The other thing that I've found is depending on how much your borrowing is percentage-wise, or what they talk about in terms of loan to value. So if you have a high loan to value, let's say it's 80 or 90% borrowing versus how much equity you have, you're less likely to be able to get consent to let. In my experience, it tends to be 75% or less, just like it would have been on a buy-to-let mortgage, where 25% of equity exists in the property and about 75% or less is what you've borrowed from the bank. Then it increases your chance of being able to get consent to let as well. So, Omar, I hope that helps and answers your question. So this question, next one, is from Abdul Najib on YouTube. Hi, what would you say is the best manner of instilling the art of delegation in your business and the best method of team building for one-man band? So I'm going to take this in the context of a property business, whether you're somebody as a landlord who's maybe self-managing, an investor, someone who's developing property, could be even a letting agent or an estate agent, all of them within the context of a property business. All my businesses are property related. Now, when I first started building a team again within the property industry, I say again because previously I was running an IT company with quite a few staff. That was some years ago, and about 15 years ago I started in property. And for a few years, essentially, I just operated on my own until I got to a place where I could afford to start employing some staff and get them to work with me and help me. So one of the things that I focus on is what's the thing that takes the most amount of my time that I could probably pass to somebody else to be able to free up my time so that I can concentrate on the key thing that's going to bring more business in. So, for instance, at that time I was sourcing property. So what I wanted to do was somebody to come and help with the managing of the property, the lettings in particularly, i.e. Room lettings, somebody to come in and show people the rooms, while I could focus on getting more deals and getting more property. So it's thinking about the business in an organizational chart way. So in an ideal world, what would be all the different roles in the business? Somebody would take care of accounts, somebody would take care of sales, somebody else take care of marketing, you've got operations, whatever it might be in your business, and you work out what these roles are. And right now it might be you filling all those roles because that's the only person in the business, but thinking about which one would really help you progress in the business, which right now would help. For example, for some people, it's if somebody was in the business taking care of accounts, that would really free you up to be able to do the stuff that you're better at. And it's thinking about what's the thing that you are really good at and what would help you. So tools that you can use for this, like psychometric profiling tools like DISC and various other ones, it'll help you understand your profile and what you're really good at, what maybe you probably benefit by having somebody else do. So thinking about then delegating those duties to somebody else. Now remember, it's about delegation, not abdication. So you've still got to be responsible, making sure that the person has what they need from you in terms of support to help you build that. I think that would be the starting point in terms of starting to build a team. And then for me, it really was about filling those roles. Who's doing sales? Who's doing marketing? who's doing the accounting, who's doing operations, and where can we start putting people in. Right at the beginning when you start, you may not necessarily be able to afford somebody on a full salary to take them on. But think about somebody may be able to help in your business in a part-time way, especially the way the world is right now. You can have somebody working for you on the other side of the world that may be doing a few hours a day for you. So for example, if you're running, say, HMOs and you're looking for some help with the marketing of the rooms, that could be somebody somewhere else in the world that's refreshing your adverts, sending messages out to people, responding to inquiries. They don't have to be sitting in the same office as you wherever you're based. So think about it in a more kind of a more creative way of how you can get other people involved to help in terms of what you're doing. For me, the core focus is really sales. How can I bring more business in? So it's something I enjoy doing, something I wanted to do, so I needed to free myself up from the other activities so I could concentrate more on that. So I hope that helps. I mean, I could spend a whole day talking about this, but I hope that's given you a few pointers and a starting point there. So you had some other message on Instagram that you want to have a look at as well. So I'll do this question, then I'll come on to that. So let me just grab this next question here. The next one here is from Adam, Adam C on YouTube. Hi Saj, is this a good time to get into rent a service accommodation in London? That's an interesting question. So service accommodation, really we're talking about short-term stay. So people staying really by the night, as opposed to a traditional tenancy agreement where somebody's staying in your accommodation for say 6 months as a minimum. So when they're staying for a much shorter period of time, that could be a few days, it could be a week or two, and you may be providing some additional services such as cleaning, bed linen change, etc., toiletries, whatever it might be. It's not that dissimilar from what a hotel environment would be. So this is the type of service that you're providing. Now within London, there's a couple of things to think about right now with what's happened in the marketplace. From what I hear, I don't operate service accommodation in London. From what I hear from many other people, is a lot of people that have struggled whilst lockdown has happened and people have not been able to run their properties in the service accommodation traditional way because people are not going out to stay in these type of properties. That those people have struggled, and many of those have come back onto the market as traditional lets. So a lot of those properties have been taken out of short stay and been moved into a traditional letting. So that could be an advantage if you're thinking about doing short stays, because now there may be less competition. But of course, it's important to think about who is your client. You know, I often talk about starting with the end in mind. Where is it ultimately you're trying to get to, and what type of business you can build around that. So what I mean by that is who is going to be staying in your property, and work backwards and say, for example, if they're tourists and they're people that are leisure guests, are those people traveling right now to London to visit London and travel around London? Maybe, maybe not, maybe nowhere near the numbers they used to be. And how is that going to affect the demand for your accommodation? Then there may be, for example, corporate or business guests that people are into travel for business and they're staying, and those numbers might be down as well. So it's thinking about who is it you're creating this accommodation for, what kind of demand there might be before you put that product together. Also, the other thing to think about, which is really important, I think many people miss this. In London, there's some additional rules when it comes to running a property service accommodation, while as all the normal pitfalls and things we talk about, is that in London, you're only allowed to let a property on short stay for 90 days of the year. So what are you going to do with the other 9 months of the year? How are you going to make money? And I know there are some people that just completely ignore these rules, but my view is it's good if you want to build a business that's going to be sustainable for a long time. You've got to build it on solid foundation. So you can't ignore these rules. You've got to be doing things properly. That's my view. And I know people talk about flouting the rules, particularly with service accommodation, because there's other factors to think about as well. For example, freeholder consents, mortgage conditions, planning permission. And these are some of the challenges that you could face in service accommodation. And as I mentioned, you have additional ones to think about when you're in London as well. So I hope that helps. Let's grab one of these off Instagram, which are not flashing up on my screen, which I have to look at separately. So question from Samson 979 on Instagram. Is there a saturation of HMO in Birmingham? So that's a good question. Just before we came onto this, I had a group call with my inner circle. My inner circle are the people I mentor, and we have a group call on a Monday evening before I tend to do this call. And one of the things we were talking about is sometimes within property, we think about everybody we're talking to is talking about this thing. So for example, there's so many HMOs, everyone's doing HMOs. Anybody you meet is interested in HMOs in Birmingham, for example. And it feels like it could be saturated that everyone's doing it. Well, actually, is everybody doing it? When we think about it, it's the people that we are talking to that within the property space may be talking about it. The reality is, excuse me, not everybody is doing HMOs. So I do believe there are parts of the market that's starting to get towards saturation. I don't believe Birmingham is saturated in terms of HMOs. We manage a lot of HMO rooms. The market is definitely more tougher than it used to be, but the prices on some of our rooms are significantly higher than they used to be as well. So, you know, it's important to be aware of the full spectrum. And also, again, starting with the end in mind, what type of tenants are you preparing the properties for? So, for example, is it professional tenants and blue collar, which is our core market? It could be those that are, for example, on some kind of benefits and that are paid by the government. It could be those that get additional support and care, like supported living. It could be students. It could be asylum seekers. All of these are different categories of HMO. So when we talk about HMO market being saturated, it's thinking about which specific sector you're talking about and also looking at the specific areas. So, for instance, if you look at, say, for example, Birmingham, and we talk about professional tenants, and we look at, say, North Birmingham, Erdington in particular, there's a lot of HMOs in Erdington, and many of those have improved their standards in recent years, which I think is a great thing, but more and more of those are competing for the professional type of tenants, but there isn't as big a demand in those areas as versus, say, for example, there might be, say, in Edgbaston or Kingsheath, for instance, or Harborne. So those areas are much, much more harder to operate in. So I think it's important just to understand what type of tenants you're looking to provide and understand your market a little bit more thoroughly before going into it. I still think there's scope within the HMO market. We're still looking at properties that we can take on and convert to good quality HMO. So I hope that helps with that. So that was on Instagram. So next question here. So I've got a question here, Sajid Mahmood on LinkedIn. How can I buy a house without going through a mortgage? Well, if we think about you've got the word buy in there, so meaning you want to acquire and own that particular asset. So when we're talking about buying, there needs to be an exchange of funds. So how can you do that? To take complete control of something, the cash has to be paid, and traditionally that needs to be either a cash purchase or it might be with a mortgage. Is a much more common way of purchases being done. So I'm assuming that you don't want to get involved in mortgages and interest, which is why you're asking the question. So one possibility could be, particularly if you're not involved in let me rephrase that. If you're not keen in getting involved with the interest aspect of mortgages, you're looking at mortgages that are based on the model of non-interest, such as the Sharia compliant mortgages. There might be some debate about how compliant they are, but you know, this is something you need to do some research on. There isn't a huge number of projects. There's a handful of lenders. Since you're on LinkedIn, if you want to ping me a message, I can suggest a couple of people you can speak to that might be able to help you with those type of products. Alternatively, if it's a purchase you're trying to do, i.e. buy ownership, then there needs to be a payment for that asset somehow. So, you know, the other way would be people that you know are lending you the money privately, the arrangement with that you're not paying interest, you know, friends, family, helping you do the purchase in that way. So it's quite challenging, it's quite difficult because we're talking about significant amounts of money. You know, even an entry-level property could be £100,000, and that's like 4 times the average salary of somebody. So some of the other more creative ways of controlling properties, such as delayed completions and lease options, we're talking about in these particular situations, you don't own the asset, you just get control of it. Because you've used the word buy, I'm assuming you want to own and purchase that property. So you're not really looking at those creative type strategies, which don't give you full ownership, but only give you control of the property for the time that you have that particular contract. So I hope that helps, Sajid. Great name, by the way. Let me see what's next. I've got quite a few questions, so I'll see which ones we can get done. I'm just trying to do this in the order that they've shown up, or the order that they've been asked. So this question from Future Funds 98 on YouTube. I want to invest in a HMO property. How easy is it to set it all up after I've done the renovations? What's the next actual steps? Does anyone check that my HMO is properly safe? Getting tenants in. So, sorry, just paraphrasing the question a little bit. So, one of the things that I would suggest, if you're interested in HMOs, is talk to your local council about what their rules and regulations are. One of the first things we need to do is understand the what's called the operating environment, the environment that you intend to operate your HMO in. What are the rules, regulations, the guidelines that you'd expect it to follow within that specific area? And this information isn't necessarily going to be somewhere that you'll get from one place. Sometimes you have to go to a few different places. So, for instance, HMO licensing is different to HMO planning, which is also different to additional licensing, for example. So you might need to go to a few different places to try and collect this information to understand what it is the requirements are that you need to try and meet. So, for example, if you're in Birmingham, because now Birmingham recently turned into an Article 4 area, what that means is we can no longer take a family house and just turn it straight into a HMO, as we used to before, because it was a permitted development thing from a planning point of view. Now what we have to do is we have to make an application to planning to be able to get permission to be able to convert it to a HMO. So putting those things aside, in terms of making the house compliant, there's lots of information easily available. Primarily, it's about keeping your tenants safe. It's the fire safety aspect, which is the key part of making HMOs compliant. And also room sizes you need to think about as well, that you comply with the minimum size requirements of rooms. But before you start converting a property, you need to think about who it is that you're creating the product for. I've said this a few times this evening. Starting with the end in mind is, who is this product going to be created for? So is it students? Is it professional tenants? Is it, for example, a supportive living environment? Is it asylum seekers? These are all different categories of HMOs. So you would then, your compliance is slightly different as well. It can be slightly different from these houses, but also how you prepare and finish the house may be very different depending on what category of tenant that's going to go into that property. As well, I've got a number of videos on my channel, because you're on YouTube. On my YouTube channel, I've got quite a lot of videos of properties I've finished and walked through, and I'm doing recent vlogs as well. If you haven't already seen those, I encourage you to go and have a look at those, where I'll do a walkthrough of properties that we part way through or near finish as well, and you'll see how we're finishing and preparing those houses, particularly when it comes to professional lets, because that's the market that we operate in. So let me just turn that other phone off. That other phone is ringing just now. Let's see. So this next question is from Ian Phipps in Facebook. My single let tenant is moving out. Should I give the property to supportive accommodation provider to maximize passive cash flow? Do I need to let my buy to let lender know? So with regards, let's start from the end. So with regards to changing your property from a single let, from a family or a couple living in the property, for it to be used for supportive accommodation, and just a clarification for those who are not sure what supportive accommodation is you're really providing accommodation for somebody who may need some kind of help and support. That could be coaching, it could be drug rehabilitation, it could be coming out of prison and helping them get back into mainstream society. It could be some mental health issues. Various aspects of supportive living exist, and ultimately it's about providing that person additional support for them to help them get into mainstream society. So the way those properties are run are a little bit different. They're not quite what you would term your normal HMOs, although they are many will operate to the same specification as a HMO property would. For example, fire doors, internet smoke detection system, or fire detection systems as well. So you have to think about why is it you want to do that, and if the reason you're looking to do that is to try and create more income, to look at what numbers you're going to get, how much work you need to do the property to adapt it for that purpose, and how much are you going to generate income wise, what wear and tear you might get on the property, which is something many people miss and not realize. They'll probably get the property back in a way that they're going to have to spend a significant amount of money to improve it. And also with regards to the contracts, how long the contract's going to last, and depending on who your arrangement is with, i.e. who's going to be paying you and what contract they have with whoever is paying them. So it's a little bit of a chain. So you want to look into the details of that, on how that works and how that's set up. And let's assuming that's all fine. And of course, as you mentioned with regards to your buy-to-let lender, it is really important that you speak to them about getting consent. In my experience, generally speaking, the lenders don't approve of such tenants or occupiers in the property. They generally want you to have tenants that are working and paying the rent out of their own means as part of your terms and conditions on your mortgage, but check with your lender. So I hope that that helps. I've got quite a few questions here. Let me see. So we've got a question here from Billy Sims on YouTube. I've got a project in Kent with planning permission, but I don't have the finance. What do you recommend? I'm 22. This is only my second project. I believe I something special. I'm assuming you mean you have something special, or maybe you're special. So Billy, first of all, well done that this is your second project, not your first one, because often people get stuck with the first one. So you've got over a massive hurdle already by getting the first one done. So that also gives you some track record, some experience, some confidence, and also in what I call making you more investable, because you have a little bit of a track record and people can see, so they may want to invest with you. Now, depending, of course, on what the project is, there are a lot of hungry bridges and development funders around. Hungry in the sense that they've got cash, they want to lend. That's because they're in the business of making money from money. They have to lend money in order to make money, but they want to make sure that they're solid deals. They want to make sure their money's safe. That's what they're primarily interested in. They don't really care about you, your experience, your age, where you are. They want to know their money's safe and you are going to be able to repay their money. That's what they're really interested in. So the deal needs to be solid. So it does need to be special. So I don't have any information in terms of what the project is, but let's say you've got a property that you're going to purchase and you're going to do some additional work to it because you've got planning permission to make it worth significantly more. Then you may be able to get a bridge to be able to do the purchase of the property and then get stage payment releases to be able to do the work as you do them. Now, you're going to need some cash around you. You might need it for the initial, maybe a small deposit. There might be legals that you'll need to cover, but there'll be the works, the initial bit of works you need to pay before the bridger will stage pay you on the property as you're doing the work. So that's kind of the most common way to get these funded. Then, of course, it's speaking to other people that may be interested in working with you, and that's essentially how I built my business. I went out to find people who were interested in getting involved in property, didn't necessarily have either the time or the experience, and I said, look, I'll do all the work and we can work on a profit share basis. And that's really how I started my property business. And as I said, because you've already done one project, you're on your second one. If you've completed and exited your first one, even better, because it shows essentially proof of concept that you've been all the way through and you've done something like this, you understand it. And talking to people in that way. Now, you can either borrow money from somebody in the form of a loan, or they could partner with you in a project in the way of a joint venture. With a loan, really, you're borrowing a fixed amount of money for a fixed period of time for a fixed return. Very straightforward. Most people understand the concept of a loan. With regards to a joint venture, really what you're doing is sharing the risks and the rewards as well. Often people focus just on the rewards, but it's really important they understand there are risks associated with projects. And so not only are they going to benefit if you make a really good profit, which hopefully you will, but if you struggle, if you get into problems or challenges, or if you lose money, you are both going to suffer in that situation as well. So it's important to understand the distinction between a loan and a joint venture when you're using other people's money. So I hope that that helps. I'm conscious of time. I've got a few questions I've not been able to answer yet. I'm here every Monday evening at 8:30 p.m. Really giving about half an hour of my time to be able to help you progress further, faster in your property investing journey. What I encourage you to get here nice and early at 8:30 on a Monday. Put your question early, because I just go through them in the order that they appear, and I just read them out and I just answer the questions for you. You know, I've got 15 years of experience that I can share with you. I don't know everything there is to know, but hey, I do have a huge amount of experience, which I'm more than happy to share with you. If you're not already, make sure you jump onto my YouTube channel, The Saj Hussain, and have a look at some of the vlogs and the videos that I've been doing there. Connect with me on social media, ping me a message. Let me know what you think of these sessions, if you find them useful, or they just disturbing your Monday evening. Let me know if they're helpful, and most certainly plan to carry on for the moment doing these as long as you want them and you're finding them useful. So thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you back here next Monday.